Hey, welcome back. I've got another super interesting auction haul here I want to go over with you. You're probably wondering right away, what even is this thing that I'm standing in front of? Well, this is a fantastic piece of farm engineering. I'm going to take a look at the history behind each one of the sections of this and also take a look at some of the stuff I've got over on the trailer. There's some pretty interesting stuff and some pretty interesting history here. Let's take a look. First thing this thing is built out of is out of a car that nobody's using anymore. In this case, we've got a 1928 Chevrolet. Just for your reference, this is what a 28 Chevy looks like before you disassemble it and use its parts for farm machinery. What we've got under here is the car frame, and we've got the car front axle, and then actually we've got another front axle over here from a different car. The way that this works is this front axle is able to steer down this drag link, then over here, so this front axle steers also. We've got an old leaf spring connected to the drag link. So if you're pulling this whole thing with a tractor, you pull this over to the side. These wheels turn that way, those wheels turn that way. You can turn super tight to get around the edge of an orchard row. Up here, we've got the 1928 Chevy engine and the gas tank from the same car. What we've done is we've taken the control panel, retrofitted it with the starter button up here. So if you're going to start this bad boy, you hit the starter button here, maybe give it a little choke. Once it kicks, we've got the throttle connection down here. It's got a little spring on there to kind of keep it at a low idle because this is actually way overpowered for what they're using it for. Over here, we've got a homemade exhaust system and, of course, the regular car radiator. Let's talk a little bit about just exactly how cool this engine is. What you're looking at here is actually some really race car potential. I actually didn't buy just this one, but I have two more 1928 Chevrolet engines that I bought at the same auction. Let's go take a look at those over on the trailer. They're a little bit easier to see. Chevrolet had been building this inline four for a number of years. This is actually the last year for it and the most advanced one. The year after this, in 1929, they'd actually come out with a inline six-cylinder engine. But the magic of this engine that makes it so desirable is actually right up here. Let me take the cover off and show you. This is actually an overhead valve engine. This is actually going to be superior to what other manufacturers like Ford were running at the time. The difference is the valve location. What we've got here for each cylinder, we've got an intake valve that opens and closes to let the combustion mixture in, and then there's an exhaust valve. I might have them backwards, I don't know which is which. Anyway, then there's an exhaust valve to let the exhaust out. So every cylinder has an intake valve and an exhaust valve. Ford had the same thing, only instead of it coming down on top, what we've got is we've got the cylinder combustion chamber that comes up and down over here, and then over to the side, the valves actually came up and down. They're pointing in the up direction. So we had the cylinder chamber, and then we came over here, and then there's like a little chamber above where the valves were. This is actually called an L-head arrangement because it makes sort of an upside down L shape. So anyway, by moving the valves over here, we actually were able to shrink that combustion chamber down a little bit and get more power to where it needs to be, pushing the cylinder down. This is actually such a popular head that a lot of these were retrofitted onto Model T Fords. You get a little bit more power out of the standard block, actually quite a bit more power out of the standard Ford block. Ford Model Ts were ubiquitous during this time period. Ford had built millions of them by this time, and they were available cheap and in numbers, so they were a very popular base upon which to build like a little race car or a speedster. And when I say speedster, it's what we would refer to today as a hot rod, although that term really hadn't evolved yet. You can actually take this Chevrolet head, and with an adapter plate, you can retrofit this onto a Model T block, and you can get way more power that way. The 1928s are the head that you want to use because this is actually the most advanced Chevrolet 4 that there was. What you see over on this side is we got dual intakes, which is very nice if you want to fit this with some kind of a dual carb situation, as well as dual outlet over on the other side. If we go 1 year earlier, just in 1927, there were not dual intakes, just a single intake, and there was a problem with those. The problem was, with a single intake, you had a lot of air passing through just a small area, and it tended to overheat right at the intake and crack. In fact, let me show you what I got over here. Over here I have an earlier Chevy head. See, this one has two exhausts, but only one inlet. And I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but right here, there is a hairline crack right there. That's just what I was told they were prone to do. It's crack right there. There were other commercial overhead valve systems that fit right down onto a Model T engine. They were made by Frontenac or Rajo or some others, but those were a little more expensive. This setup here is actually just using parts that you can find at your local junkyard. So this is the sort of race car or hot rod you'd build if you were on a budget. When I say Model T race car, this is kind of what I'm thinking of. This is one I saw at Hershey a couple years ago and snapped a picture. Speedsters can come in really all kinds of different configurations, limited really only by your imagination and just how cool you want to be. This one is very cool. Here's the third 1928 Chevy motor that I've got. This actually kind of highlights what I think is actually super cool about this engine. On the L-head design that I was talking about earlier, the valves kind of came up like this, and your camshaft was down here, so you had these like little push rods that would push the cams up. On this one, the camshaft is still way down here, but the valves are way up here. So you've got these really long push rods like as long as your arm on this thing. Let me take the plate off of here so I can show them to you a little bit better. So look at these things. These are the valves up here, so these get pushed up and down to open and close the valves. Then you got the camshaft is way down here. So then we've got these really long push rods. These are just fantastic. That's what I like about working on old engines, is the more stuff about them that's just different than what you're used to seeing, just like the neater it is to see that all operate. Let's go back now and take a look at this contraption that I got and what this 1928 Chevy engine is actually running. This contraption on the back here is actually an orchard sprayer from the 1920s. Over on the other side, we can see the name a little bit better. See, this says Niagara Sprayer Company. We have the remains of a pretty nice decal and some graphics here. Let me show you how this works. Attached to the back of the 28 Chevy engine, we actually have a wooden flat belt pulley. That's a wooden pulley there. So the flat belt comes over here, attaches here to the back of the sprayer. We've got a like a clutch system here that engages. This comes over to the other side of the sprayer. Let's walk around over here. Over here, we've got another flat belt pulley. And it comes back here and runs the blower. Little tensioner pulley there. Anyway, the blower blows air across this. And then up in this hopper, you're going to have like a powdered fertilizer sort of a thing. We've got a little chain drive here. The chain drive actually has some brushes in there that sort of dispense this powder down into the airstream. And it comes back here, it comes out the hose. So what you do is you're standing on the back of this thing and you're holding this hose and you're shooting it up at your trees, your orchard trees, and shooting fertilizer out like a cannon. I actually found a 1920 Niagara sprayer operating instruction online. Here's an illustration that shows a guy about to use it. I misspoke earlier, by the way. It's not fertilizer that's typically used in this. It's a pesticide dust, typically for fruit trees or nut trees or even tobacco. The widespread use of this kind of pesticide really started around the turn of the century or maybe a little bit earlier, just as the Industrial Revolution was kicking off, and really allowed farms to increase the quantity and quality of the produce that they were sending to market. If you ever walk into a grocery store and appreciate just the high quality and quantity of food that's available to us at a very reasonable price, it's this kind of machinery that really paved the way for that. This is actually the engine that the operating instructions want you to use with the sprayer. This is 2.25 horsepower. That's what I meant when I said that Chevy engine was a bit overpowered for what it was doing. But hey, why spend a couple of bucks on the engine that they want you to use when you've got a perfectly good old car sitting right there? Come on, people, let's be a little bit more thrifty. Here it is mounted on the back of a 1920s truck. Go ahead, just spray that pesticide up into the air without any kind of a mask or other protection. I'm sure it's fine. This actually gave me the idea that it would be super cool to mount this on the back of a truck, take the sprayer and hook it up to maybe a hit-and-miss engine, and mount it on the back of a truck to take to a car show. It would just look neat. Just as kind of an aside, a couple years ago, I had bought another orchard sprayer. This is a different type. It has a big wooden tank, mostly just to show you that I have very poor impulse control at auctions. Anyway, a guy bought this, and he was going to cut some doors in the back of it and turn it into a bar. He brought, a master carpenter down here to take a look at it and make the whole plan. So I think that actually would have turned out really super well. So you can do a lot of different things with this old stuff. Last thing I want to point out over here before I move over to some other things that are on the trailer is this really cool hood ornament. It's really actually too bad that these wings are broken off. Otherwise, this would be very nice. What we've got up here is what's called a motometer. This one's made by Boyce. They made a lot of them. And what this is a temperature gauge. It directly reads off the temperature of the water in your radiator. That way, as you're driving, you can look up at the front of the hood and see the temperature of your coolant. Nowadays, you get a sort of the engine temp gauge up on your dash, but back in the 1920s, it was up on the hood. This last engine on the trailer is actually a Lycoming Model CT. That's from the late 1920s. Lycoming made engines that were put into a lot of different cars and trucks. I think this one is a truck engine. I think international trucks used it about 1927 or 28. I was told that the family used to have a Rio truck that was on the farmstead, but that's gone now. This could be the engine out of the Rio truck. I haven't been able to find a real definitive list of what trucks or cars that this engine would fit. I even tried checking the dark web, nothing there. That's what I refer to as about the third page of the Google search results. That's essentially the dark web, isn't it? Anyway, I can't find any information online in terms of exactly what trucks that these went in, but I'm pretty sure they were used in international and maybe Rio and probably some other ones. This is a Chevrolet rear end, probably out of that same 1928 or somewhere very close to that. There's sort of an interesting thing going on with the hubcap. Let me show you. See, this hubcap has just a straight line that kind of looks like just the center part of the Chevy bow tie. What this actually is this is an aftermarket company that's trying to get as close as they can to the Chevy logo without actually getting sued. So this is an aftermarket hubcap. Pick up some early T stuff. There's an early pan. This windshield here, actually all brass with brass hinges and everything. This is an automatic. You probably used about 1911, so that's how old that is. One interesting thing about this 1911 windshield is that it has the original glass in here. In safety glass, you can see a little bit of a line here, but there's no line there. That is actually just plate glass, regular old plate glass that they used to use for windshields all the way up into the 1930s, I think. Anyway, so if you're in an accident, your head goes through that, it's not going to break up into a million pieces like safety glass does. That's going to actually break into sharp shards just like a window would. So not particularly safe. Safety glass was definitely an improvement. Most people that are driving these older cars out on the road have replaced this original glass with modern safety glass just for safety reasons. Over in these boxes over here, I've got a coil box from a Model T Ford from 1926 or 27. You notice on a lot of these parts, I'm able to actually designate the year pretty close on the parts. Model Ts were made from 1908 to 1927, and there was just constant development and improvement over the course of those years. Well, they were not all the same, and even the individual parts changed a lot. That a lot of times, individual parts, I'm able to date them pretty well. This is actually pretty interesting. This looks like it fits the back of a Model T. That kind of looks like the output shaft on a Model T. And we've got a flat belt pulley here. So that way you can take a Model T engine and use it as a power plant to run things around the house like, hey, orchard sprayers or whatever else you might think of. Here's a water pump for a Model T Ford. This is actually an accessory. Model Ts didn't actually come with a water pump, but a lot of them retrofitted them on there. This was made by Matic, patented 1923. Actually kind of a nice one. We got a pair of Model T Ford headlights. Looks like a little carbide generator. What else? Oh, another coil box. We've got a gas tank float made by Stewart. Stewart made speedometers and things. But yeah, first time I think I've ever seen a Stewart gas tank float valve. It's all solid brass too. It must be from something early. Interesting. What else have we got down here? We've got a bunch of Model T Ford commutators, actually just sort of an early form of distributor is what it is. This one here is interesting because it looks like it's in the original box. Monarch timer. Otherwise, nothing really too special. That might be just the stock Ford one that was in there. But the box is neat. That may be realistically like a 100-year-old box. Next up, I have a bunch of gas tanks. This round one right here is Model T Ford, about 1912 up to 1920. This one over here is a sloping gas tank. That's Model T Ford 1915 to 1920. That's sedans over there, and this is other cars over here. This big one in the back is actually a homemade tank, but I think it's really cool, all the rivets. It's got like a real steampunk feel. Not really sure what to do with that. We've got some Chevrolet disc wheels here. These can be used on Chevrolets, or a lot of people will actually also put them on Model T Fords. You can retrofit them, kind of give you more of a racy look if you're building a Speedster. On there, we've got these little clips here that hold the rim to the rest of the wheel. That's the part that has the tire on it. There's a steel rim there, and these little clips hold them together. Those can be a little hard to find. Over here, here's the remains of a wood spoke wheel, not Ford. I don't know, that might be Chevy too. You can see where the wood spokes used to go in these holes, but that's all gone now. So we've got the outer rim here where the tire attaches, and then the inner rim here where the wood spokes are attached, and then all these clips that hold everything together. Once again, a lot of times these clips can be really hard to find. So I've got a couple here with full sets of clips. So those are nice. We got a whole bunch of jacks here. There's actually an interesting one back here. Let me pull that one out. There's no mistaking what car this goes to. It says Studebaker right on there. A lot of times these jacks, the supplier would actually supply a number of different companies with the same jack, in which case this little plate would just unscrew and then replace it with another plate that has that other company's name on it. I don't know if that's the case with this one, but I've seen a lot of them where you see exactly the same jack, but it's got different companies' names on this plate. Anyway, that's a nice jack there. These ones over here are a little bit different. These aren't the style of jack that you would use to jack up your car if you're repairing it. They just kind of lever up and will lift the car up just a little bit off the ground. These are called winter jacks. And these is if you're not going to be using your car in the winter, you just put one under each wheel. The hub fits right in there, and lever them up. Get the tires up off the ground just a little bit. That way your tires don't take a set or get a flat spot over the winter. Saves your tires, and so they'll be ready to go in the spring. Model T Ford 1926-27 wire wheel hub. These are actually hard to find. Unfortunately, this one's pretty roached out. So that's it for that auction haul. Thanks for sticking around. I do want to say thanks to the guys in the Vintage Chevy Club forum for answering my questions. Chevys are really not my strong suit, so they were very patient. I also, if it wasn't clear in the last video, I want to say thanks to my daughter Samantha. She's the one that got me all of the subscriptions that I've got. Stick around for the next video. I'm going to be doing a walk around of a 1927 Model T 1-ton truck that has a really interesting history behind it. I think you're really going to enjoy it. I know I'm really stoked about it. I'll talk to you later and see you in the next one. Bye.